this would maximize profit. So the wholesaler had a price of $18.99, sold it to retailers. So their marginal cost is $18.99 is what they picked it up for. Elasticity was estimated to be 2.1872. So what would be the optimal price to maximize profits? As soon as you get an answer, yell it out. Maybe you don't have to yell. If you're a little more subtle, then you can just kind of speak it out. Or if you're real bashful, you can whisper it out. Okay.
2630.
2630. Okay, other people.
I got 2767.
2767. Let's see, that was a 2117.
Wow.
We're getting a nice little variety pack here. Myself, I can't do it that many steps. Any other different answers?
I got 2229.
2229. So let's see, I started writing my answers up here. So let's see, we got any other answers? Is that it? Going, gone. $34.99. So, what did we screw up? First of all, let's double check my math. You ever see this in grocery stores?
Yeah.
Right? I just saw one this weekend in the paper. Country Mart had this. I rarely get the Ottawa Herald, but I was in line and I decided to grab it. And on the back side of the newspaper, full page ad that said, spare ribs, $1.58 a pound. And I'm a rib. I like making ribs. I make pretty good ribs, by the way. And a $1.58 a pound is dirt cheap. I mean, you can't find it for $1.58. I mean, I figured that must be at cost or even a little bit below cost, but probably at least at cost. And it says limit on quantities and all that kind of jazz. Well, that's what they're doing, right? They're getting you in the store. I go in and I spend $200 on groceries just because I wanted to buy some ribs, right? So all the time that type of thing is going on. So that's what happened here with the books. So they're trying to sell some more books. If you're Walmart, you're trying to sell all the other products in Walmart, you know, and all the... Same. Down to what are you going to price them at? And so each one of these, and we're going to get into some strategic behavior in the game theory chapter, but each one of them is just cutting price to see who can get the volumes, because they're all playing the same game. All the big boxes are anyway. The mom and pop stores, the little tiny bookstores, they might need their markup, even though they might play this game a little bit to get you in, buy some other books, even at a mom and pop place. But they generally can't afford to do $20 because this isn't necessarily taking into account transportation costs, right? So they might be buying it at $18.99, but there's shipping costs. And if you are buying them by the barge full, you can probably ship them to your stores in a much more cost-efficient way on a per book price. You might drive that cost down to a penny, whereas the mom and pop has $2 into shipping because they're only buying 10 of them instead of 1,000 of them, right? So that's where things can get interesting too, but they would be buying them at the $18.99 price. Okay, so this whole MR equals MC business, what we learned here is true in a single product environment. And so things start to get more complex as we have multiple products, and we can start to look at the complementarity or the substitutability of products for my company as well as for other companies. And we start to take these other issues into account. All right, so good. Here are the results. These are kind of interesting to get some real numbers. So Amazon estimated that 1% of its $2.89 billion second quarter revenue, $2.8 billion second quarter revenue was due to the ad of customers who also purchased the Harry Potter book. All right? So they were selling a lot more books. So we suck people in on the low margin Harry Potter book, and we sell them a couple other books that are high margin that we've got ramped up to 30% or 40% or whatever our normal markup is for that. All right, so more complicated pricing. So one of the themes that you'll see is that we're going to no longer think about the marginal revenue of an individual product, but kind of similar to what we did in the single product case. What was the reason why anybody remember? Had to deal with pricing and the single price type thing. So why did the marginal revenue curve to the firm lie below that? So if I sold the 10th book versus the 11th book, the 11th book brought revenue to my company of $5, even though I priced it at 10. So how can the price be 10, but the revenue generated for my company only be 5?
Because your costs for each additional unit increase?
No, it's not the cost. But you're right, costs are going up. But I don't even have a marginal cost curve in this picture.
Right.
So it's strictly on the sales side of life. What was going on between 10 and 11. As I start to draw in more information, I hope a few bells will be ringing for you. So at 10 units, I could sell them for $11. Generated by the 11 less than the price I'm selling it for. Give you a little bit more information.
Because you have to set it the same price.
Good, because you have to set it at the same price.
Yeah.
So when we want to sell an extra unit, we can't just drop the price for the extra unit. We have to drop the price for all of the units. So we lose that revenue, but we gain that revenue. And so it's a trade-off, right? I'm going to lose the revenue off the previous units that I sold. I'm going to gain the extra one. So that's where that result came from. The reason I wanted to call that back to your attention is because we have an even more complicated thing going on with the multi-product firm, but it's very similar. If I sell another unit of a good that helps generate a sale of another good, in the grand scheme of things, the marginal revenue of selling an additional Potter book is greater than the book itself. If I sell the Potter book for 20 bucks, but I end up selling 5 other books priced at 10 bucks a piece, the revenue for my company, the marginal revenue of an additional Harry Potter book, is technically the price of the Potter book, 20 bucks, plus the $50 of additional books I sold. Right? Make sense?
Yeah.
So we're starting to kind of do that same logic here, thinking about the multi-product firm having mixed influences on revenues. Okay, good. Well, you don't have to digest all that one time here. We're going to work on a few more. Let's see, did we talk about this one already? Yeah, we just stated this. We're going to maximize total profit for the company rather than profit off of any individual product line is kind of the key to the process. All right, so another example. Got a video store, a couple of them. You acquire your rival. So video stores are close to being obsolete already, but there's still a few out there. We got Family Video and maybe a couple other hangers out there. All right, so one video store purchases the other. Would you change the price of video rentals at each store? So imagine that you're competing with this other company. Would you want to change prices, or do you have the prices the same at each store? So like, oh yeah, well, this is what we do at this store. We'll just copy it lock, stock, and barrel to this store. You know, would you want to do that?
In some sense, yes.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on how far apart they are, but if you have a different price and they're owned by the same place, you're like, okay, so I'm going.
So they're in town. Imagine a town like Ottawa. I think that, you know, there's a couple video stores. There's a couple pizza places. So we could kind of tell a similar story. A couple pizza places, but videos are kind of a little more homogeneous product, right? They all have James Bond, and it's the exact same James Bond at one video store as the other. So do we want to make these two stores identical or differentiate them?
I mean, if you purchase it, I'm assuming you're going to put your name on both buildings.
Sure. Yeah,
So,
we probably want to do that, although not necessarily. You know who's? Do you know how many manufacturers of breakfast cereal there are? Go down the breakfast cereal line. What is there? 100 at least, or 200 different cereal brands? There's like 2 or 3. So they've given the perception of competition. So this has been a little trick that people have done over time too. They acquire businesses, give the perception of competition so that the consumer thinks, oh yeah, well, we'll just go to that. Another huge example of this that I guess kind of figured out. I don't think it has any big secret, but something that I don't think most people think about. Again, the economic way of thinking, something that hopefully you guys will start doing. Las Vegas. The Las Vegas Strip. Lots of hotel choices, right? most of the hotels are owned by Caesars Entertainment. So Caesars Palace controls a lot of them, and then MGM Grand, the M Life, controls like the Mirage and Luxor and what's that?
I think they own Excalibur too.
Excalibur. You go down the list. So next time you're in Vegas, pay attention to. Oh, that's right. I got to get my other video source plugged in. Pay attention to the ownership of the Las Vegas Strip. That whole. Oh, crud. Sorry, Jesse. I lost her on one camera. Jeez, that didn't give me much warning then. Pay attention to the websites, or you can pull it up on the website. Like I said, they don't hide from it, but people's perception is that, oh, I could stay anywhere. There's so many awesome hotels on the Strip. That's not. It's just a differentiated product offered by a couple companies. Really, 2 different companies. I haven't added up the total numbers. There's a few, oddballs in there, but most of that whole south end of the Strip is all owned by 2 companies. And so that can be powerful too, having the perception of competition. Let's see, I could probably put video on here so Jesse can hear me.
So we can keep the names different. That would change.
Hey Jesse, I forgot to put in my power supply. That's why you lost audio and video of one. So I'm getting us hooked up. Say that again.
Well, I said if you keep the names different on building, then possibly you keep the prices different.
Possibly.
As long as people don't, I don't want to tell a lot of them, that catch on big places really bad.
Oh yeah, especially in Ottawa. Yeah, that's a good example. Whereas in Vegas, there's people kind of oblivious to the world, for that matter, going there. They might not even care. Most people don't care if you give. But the thing about Vegas that intrigued me is that, when I started going to different conferences early on, I started thinking, well, I'll just shop around. I'm the economist, and there's lots of competition there. Well, they're all inflated up. So I think if it was a marketplace where all of those were individual owners on the Strip, prices would fall a lot. Yeah. Prices would fall. Airline isn't quite the same. There's quite a bit of competition in the airline, partly I think because it's a little bit more. Although I'm a big Southwest fan. But for the most part, people book and they think an airline's an airline. At least that's the way I used to be. Whatever's the cheapest is what I'll take.
Delta's been pretty good lately.
Ooh, we might have video now. Hey, we're back. Okay. Let's see.
Hey, if you ever go to Vegas at Excalibur, it's like $35 Insane.
No, and that's what I'd say Excalibur.
It's just a double hotel.
I think Excalibur is probably one of the better values on the Strip. I mean, I was just there, and so I did shop. I was almost going to stay at Excalibur, and then I ended up staying at the Luxor for about the same. Luxor and Excalibur are owned by the same group.
Yeah.
So
they have the little
So anyway, when you're shopping, you think like, oh, I could get this one or this one, and whoever gives me the best price. Well, it's all staged. It's all managed. It's all intentional.
Well, I think it depends
You're
on
not
the
being.
amenities, though.
What's that?
It depends on the amenities. Like, if you go to Vegas, some of the hotels you go to get you into the clubs. But if you, Russ, are going for a conference, I don't think you go to clubbing. So why?
Now wait a second. I can club with the best of them.
Culver's are doing that.
Why would you stay at the Bellagio? Why would you stay at the Bellagio if the Bellagio can get you into the club? You would stay at where you said you stayed.
Right. So then that gets into the bundling issue of how they're bundling products, right? So Bellagio is good for clubbing.
It's real nice.
I'll remember that. All right.
They have like the #1 club in Vegas there, the Marquee.
Really?
No wait, is that?
I haven't. One of these days, I'm going to stay at the Bellagio. I ended up staying at the Venetian because one of my conference sites was at the Venetian. That place was fabulous.
And that one has a gondola.
Yeah, it has the gondola, but the room itself was one of the nicest rooms I've ever stayed in. King size bed, sunken living room, L-shaped couch, 3 TVs, one in the bathroom, one in this living room, one in the. I was by myself, for crying out loud. They give for these conferences, they always give a discounted, conference rate. I think the normal rate was like $400 a night. They were down to $189 a night. which is still, you know, up there. I stayed at the Luxor for 83 or 89 or something. I switched like after that conference. I went there for 2 conferences, so one of them was at a different hotel, so I switched. But part of what we're talking about tonight. So I'm not really blabbing. I'm actually talking about what tonight's topic is. Okay, so any other comments on Vegas?
I actually found a legit map that shows everything of who owns what.
Oh, of who owns what?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
5 or 6.
What was that? What site are you on?
It's VegasTodayAndTomorrow.com/Monopoly.
Oh, cool. Okay. Send me that link, will you?
Yeah. But it was last updated 2 years ago though, so it could have changed a little bit. But
Although I have to remind you that you're losing a point, but that's a cool link. But we're supposed to distract. We're supposed to get rid of all outside distractions. So I know our knee-jerk reaction is to start Googling. So hey, it was a point. We all shared in it. We all shared in the value. You're going to lose one, but that's okay.
I've already been given 2 from you. So.
Oh, there you go. See, it's just kind of a give and take. All right, so that is interesting though. And then, so the map have,
You'll just have to wait.
but they were highlighted,
Different color coding.
color coded. Oh, cool. Okay. All right, so what should you do for pricing? You own both video stores.
I was thinking along, if it was an auto, you would have a monopoly now, probably.
Mhm.
So you should raise your price.
Or you certainly have more pricing power, right? Regardless, for sure you have more pricing power, even if there's a couple other competitors and it's not maybe a true monopoly.
Are we assuming that red box doesn't exist or Netflix or Hulu?
No, we're not assuming anything necessarily, but I think what would that do to the elasticity of demand? Would that tend to make it higher or lower if there's Redbox and Hulu and other alternatives? Higher. So the elasticity goes up with more substitutes. But the bottom line is if they were a true competitor of yours, when you combine, what happens to the elasticity? Does it get bigger or smaller? It gets smaller because there's less competitors, right? So that's the logic of it, is what direction are we heading? Are we getting more elastic or less elastic? And so I think your gut feeling here is to possibly raise prices. Sounds kind of interesting. So think about the bundle now. Demand for a bundle of substitutes is less elastic than demand for the individual products. Less elastic demand implies a higher or optimal price. Where does that statement come from? Less elastic demand implies a higher optimal price. Where does that come from? Less elastic. Don't mind me, I'm just swinging my arms around. All right. So 1 over, if it's less elastic, so if this number's 3 and it becomes less elastic, like a 2, right? So if it goes from a 3 to a 2, we got 1/3 versus 1 over 1/2. So we got a 50% markup versus a 30% markup. Right? So that, your gut feeling was right. So to have less elastic means that you probably should raise your prices. There's a higher optimal price. Okay. So if we raise the price on the more elastic good, we can try to push price-sensitive customers to the higher margin product. So we raise price, demand, quantity demanded goes up or down. Raise price, demand goes down. But now we're in kind of a neat position, right? Because where we get that result is that the quantity demanded falls because people flock to the other good. The demand for the other good goes up. So an increase in the price of Coke increases the demand for Pepsi, right? But now you own Coke and Pepsi. So raise the price on one good leads to an increase in demand for the other. We can start to play some games on the margin and try to push people to the higher margin good. All right, so we can start to think about pricing a little bit differently here using our knowledge of elasticity. The one that is more elastic, so raise the price on the more elastic good. So more elastic means more of a quantity effect or less of a quantity effect? The more of a quantity effect, right? So is the demand, so when you start thinking about that, the way I like to visualize it is with a flatter demand curve or a steeper demand curve. So if we draw a demand curve, is this one more elastic or is this one more elastic? This one, right? So if I raise the price by $1, I lose a whole bunch of people. Why? Because people are going over to the other product now that I own. So I'm not actually losing the people. I'm a shepherd with his sheep directing the people to the higher margin good, right? So I pick my good with the more elastic demand, and I can kind of push people into the other product that I have. So we try to be a little clever. Questions or comments on that? That's the general idea. Okay. So some other strategies, possibly related to our video store or possibly related to either one. Oops. Let's see, where am I going here? Another strategy, this one. So reposition the products so they don't directly compete with each other. So we don't want them necessarily competing. We might be able to organize our store differently. We might be able to put certain videos at one store and not the other, so that kind of creates a different feel at one or the other. So people tend to shop at one and not the other. Movie theaters come to mind on this. It's not so much in Ottawa because we have one movie theater, but in Ames, and I'm not that familiar with Lawrence to know, or maybe Olathe. In Ames, there was a discount theater. You ever been to towns where they got the dollar theater?
Yeah.
Well, up in Ames, the dollar theater was owned by the other theater, the big theater. So the new theater got all the new releases. The dollar theater, of course, got the ones that have been out for a while. Why? If you think back, like, why do they do it that way? Why don't they just keep prices high for everything? Price discrimination. So if we can, those people who are high-valued customers, when the Harry Potter movie comes out, they're standing in a line because they have to see it that first night at midnight, right? Or within that first week. They're willing to pay $9 a ticket, $12 a ticket, 3D glasses, $14. Whatever the case is, they're customers. Then there's people like me who have learned, at least over time, to be more patient. And I'll wait 3 months until it goes to the dollar theater, because dang it, I'm not going to pay more than $1 if I don't have to. I can wait. I don't need to see it that first week of the run. So I wait, and I wouldn't go to the $12. But now that theater's figured out that we can get both parties to come to the theater, right? We'll take the high-valued customers early in the fancy, glitzy, brand new theater, and then we got the little rundown, slightly skanky, sticky floor dollar theater that the McCulloughs of the world can go watch the show at. Now, all of them are going to have something in common, though. At the big theater and the small theater, what's in common at both? Popcorn's priced the same, baby. Yeah. And for an extra quarter, you can make that a super size.
Get a free refill.
Right? And get a free refill, even though 64 ounces of Diet Coke is more than enough. But do you pay that extra quarter? You're like, well, I might want another drop. I better. It's only a stinking quarter. And so the theater sucks another quarter out of me, right? So these are all pricing schemes based on human behavior and economics. That's why these are set up that way. So your eyes will be open, hopefully, as you start to go to different places and observe some of these things going on. All right.
To stop you becoming a consumer and then
Yeah, well, that's a whole different story, yes. That's another type of patience, and a good virtue is shifting out of consumption goods and into saving goods. But as an economist, we just think of that as trading off current consumption for future consumption, right? So the goal is not to die with $1 million in the bank, necessarily. Some people it might be. But to make sure you've got all those dollars all the way to your grave and you can kind of do what you wish with it. You're just trading current consumption for future consumption. And that's what saving is all about.
Well, that's what your parents tell you all the time. You should save and send you.
Yeah, but most of the time, I don't know if you're like me, you're like, forget that. I can save tomorrow. Right? That was my philosophy always is, I'll do it tomorrow. And then 5 years later, I'll give you the answer, I can make more tomorrow. I'll start that tomorrow. Tomorrow. Before you know it, yep, you're broke and you never got to tomorrow. And in the meantime, some of the unforeseen things in life, the unexpected things that are likely to happen, but you just don't know when, all of a sudden crop up. And all right, now that is getting a bit off topic here compared to pricing, but it's kind of fun. All right, so commonly owned complements. So now we got the video store in a parking lot. So common ownership means pricing decisions must consider the effects on movie rentals as well as the parking lot. Right? So parking is a big deal. Oh, and the real estate development that I used to do was right in the campus area up in Ames, and so parking was a huge deal. On how much you're providing, do people get it? Do you park for free or do you have to pay for parking? Do we meter parking? You know, blah, 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 blah. And so not as big a deal in Ottawa, but even here on campus we have parking issues. It's funny, it comes up every year. Do we close that lot? Do you have your permits? Should we, you know, the students are ticked off because the old people that need to lose weight anyway aren't having to walk more than a city block to get to the class. And, the old fat people think they're entitled to it, and the young kids got plenty of energy. They can walk anyway, and so it's kind of an endless battle. But there are some specific recommendations from an economic standpoint. All right, so reducing the price at one increases the demand at other. So what happens to marginal revenue? So how do complements work again? So if we reduce the price of parking, what happens to sales of videos? Demand for videos goes up, right? So they move in opposite directions. So if we acquire both products now, we have a bundled good, again, we can do a little redirecting possibly. We can change the pricing scheme such that we might be able to increase profitability. All right, so I have a little bone to pick with the with the book that's been picked, but the third edition didn't change. So, so the book recommends that you should lower the price of both goods, and I'm a little disappointed. I got to admit, I emailed. I suppose it was 2 years ago, because I think it was the very first time I taught this course with this book. I emailed the author, Luke Froeb. He was very cordial, and I said, I think that it would be better to decrease the lower margin good, so the one with the higher. So rather than decrease both goods, we decrease the lower margin good, and again, shift people into the other good that has the higher margin. So now the bundle price, the price of both goods is going down as a bundle, but we're not reducing necessarily both prices, we're just reducing one. He shot me back an email and he says, I agree, that makes sense. I didn't write this part of the book. But yeah, that sounds logical. So he totally agreed with my argument. And then he didn't change it in the third edition. It's still the same thing. So even though I brought up the change, it made perfect logic and he agreed to it. He didn't change it. But that's okay. That's life.
Whoever wrote that part of the book.
What's that?
Whoever wrote that part of the book must have been stuck on it.
That could be. Yeah, maybe they were just stuck on it. But So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. So rather than lowering both goods, lower the lower margin good, because you're not going to make as much money on that. That'll still lower the bundle price, shift people into the high margin good, you'll make more money than if you were to lower both prices, was
Now, if
the
you lower
logic.
both prices at the split difference of the amount being lowered, the more money will do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you split it the same value at the end of the day, the bundle price will be the same, and they see a reduction in two separate things.
You know, you'd have to drop some actual numbers, but in concept, no, because if you have the choice to lower the price of the lower margin good and effectively lower the bundle price by $10, or you lower each price by $5, right? By doing the one, you're going to shift sales more into the other complementary good. So you'll end up having more margin on the one that makes you more money when the sales go up.
Okay, I got you.
So, all right, but either way it works. You get the same result whether you lower both or lower one. This was kind of an extra level of detail that says, hey, we could even push this a little bit further if we did it this way. Okay. So a lot of places have some unique aspects to them. Cruise ships, hotels, stadiums, commercial parking lots. What do they have in common? What's that? Overpriced. Relative to what? Huh? What you want to pay. Okay, fair enough. Overpriced for Skylar, a deal for somebody else, but see, that's the economist to me. Relative to what? You know, you got to always, it has to be compared to have any meaning. So that works for me. At least it's compared to something. So think about the nature. Cruise ships, imagine a cruise ship.
They're all luxury.
Hotels, okay, luxury. They're all a little bit on the luxury side. I'd agree with that. What's that?
Tourism.
Tourism.
Yep.
Some relationship there.
They're all limited. You can't just add another hotel if demand goes up a little bit.
Okay.
It takes a long time to build a new ship or stadium.
Right. So what are the upfront costs like these, the startup costs? Large or small?
High.
They're high, right? You just don't go build a 1,000-person cruise ship overnight. So they take some time for one thing, but they also just take a lot of money to build them. And so what else about, well, you kind of answered this, Jesse, but they have a capacity constraint. That's one feature, right? So if you build a, go ahead, Justin.
Sorry, I would say they're all kind of subject to demand based upon what event's going on or what season you're in, or
Because of the supply being fixed, right? So if there's an event, the stadium holds 30,000. The cruise ship has 1,000. There's 200 hotel rooms, right? And you're, like you said, they're subject maybe to an event going on, a special event or whatever. So there's a capacity constraint, and then there's some large fixed costs involved on the front end of it. So that leads to some interesting issues related to fixed costs and sunk costs and marginal cost pricing. So I want you to think about the pricing in two different phases. So in the capacity question, we haven't built it yet. So we're thinking in the long run, I can vary all my resources by definition. So I can have a 300-person hotel, or I can have a 250-person hotel. I can build a 50,000 seat stadium, or I can do a 70,000 seat stadium, right? So in the design phase, we have more choices at hand. The logic of figuring out how many seats to put in the stadium is the same. You do an estimate of, well, what do I think of a ticket sale is going to be over a long period of time? What do I think the cost of each seat is going to be? Well, if I build a 60,000 stadium, it's going to be $3 billion. If I build a 50,000, it's going to be 2.9 billion, whatever. So you go through all of the costs, right? So long run, everything's variable in the long run, so all your costs are potentially in question. And then your revenues, you're setting some estimates.
I was just thinking about this week. On most fixed or sunk costs, if you took a loan out for $1 million, but you're paying mortgage on it monthly, is that fixed?
Mm-hmm. It's still independent. So a fixed cost is one that does not vary with the quantity sold.
Correct. Is it also sunk?
It's sunk if it cannot be recaptured.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Because
So-
you're gonna have to pay it. Well.
So in the case of a loan, you know, it might take a sale to pay off the debt to kind of get rid of that expense. But there's potentially an out, but there might be some other costs associated with achieving that. But it is definitely fixed. It's a fixed cost because it doesn't vary. It doesn't matter if I still have to make that mortgage payment whether I have the hotel half full or half empty, or half full or 90% full. Okay, but now you're touching on kind of the next part of this. How do things change when we open up for business? What changes in this cost and or revenue function? So now we build a hotel, we have a big ribbon, we cut the ribbon, we're up and running. What's changed? Yeah. Kind of, I guess. In what way? Okay. So you're in the short term, right? Or the short run. Okay, what else?
Now you're gonna get revenue.
Okay. Did the revenue change from what you had before, estimated? Did it need to change? Did it for sure change? Maybe it's the same, maybe it's better. Do you have more clarity on the revenue? Yes, because I mean, usually when I've done real estate development projects, sometimes we're a year or plus when we go through the estimation stage when we're deciding the capacity compared to when the rent comes. So we cut the ribbon, we're starting to rent apartments. Well, now what are we going to rent them at? What is our actual revenue versus expected revenue? Okay. So, but it's possible that could be maybe even a little higher if you underestimate it or something. But that one, what about the marginal cost of putting somebody in a seat? Let's take the stadium for now. Maybe the cruise ship works too, because you guys have all been hit up on the cruise ship offers, right? So, what is the marginal cost associated with another person sitting in the seat at the stadium or filling that vacant cabin on the cruise ship? Is it high or low?
The stadium very low.
The stadium's pretty darn low, right? That's probably the best example to run with. So when we're up in this phase, the long run marginal cost, we've got, well, is it going to be 2.9 billion or 3 billion? 3 billion divided by 60,000. We do some sort of calculation to come up with the average cost at the margin of building a 60,000 seat stadium versus a 50,000 seat stadium, right? But once it's built and we chose the 60,000 seat stadium, what is the marginal cost of putting another butt in the seat? Next to nothing, right? So the marginal cost is next to nothing in terms of processing another ticket and handing it to the person, and maybe a person at the door having to do one more rip instead of 1,000 rips, they have to do 1,001 rips. Zero, right? I mean, there's really no significant cost associated with getting that person in the seat, in that marginal seat. All right, so the decision making changes dramatically in these type of industries.
Would for a stadium, would marginal cost for every seat that's not filled, like play involved, like the revenue you would get from selling off?
That would be, so you're talking about basically the opportunity cost.
Yeah, well, like, yeah, basically. Because you're losing money by not having.
So what do you think? questioning whether there is an opportunity cost of not getting somebody in there. Is there cost beyond some sort of, so I brought up the ticket ripping or whatever. Is there a marginal cost? Is there an actual implicit or explicit cost of that thing sitting vacant? I think is what you're touching on, right?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out where that loss goes to. Would it just be the loss of revenue? Or would it be-
Or like, there's, instead of 10,000 people, there's only 5, so that's that 5,000 less people buying hot dogs and drinks, and 5,000 less people buying a souvenir, or
Okay. So is that a fixed cost or a variable cost? Did it change with the number of seats we sold?
Yeah.
but it didn't cost you any less to open the building. You're still paying the same amount to run the line. You're still paying the same
So it's
amount
fixed.
for the building, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's let that sit here as we kind of work through this. So making pricing decisions, ignoring the sunk or fixed costs, which are big with the cruise ship or the building. We hit this capacity. So what should we do? What is the optimal thing to do when we have a capacity constraint? Max it out, right? So we want to fill it up, whatever it takes, because if we're not filling it up, then we're leaving some money on the table. So you're the only stadium in town, so you got kind of a monopoly situation, right? You lower the price, you know you'll put more butts in the seats. So you've got that going, but let's just, for simplicity, assume that you got a lower price for all seats to do it, right? So kind of the traditional form. So that gives you a marginal revenue that's downward sloping. Let's just say marginal costs are constant. So the cost of putting an additional butt in the seat is about the same, whatever that little bit is. If it's a hotel, we might have cleaning of the hotel and other things going on that are a little more attributable to an extra person staying in a room. So the optimal quantity is right here. Now, if we open up the stadium instead of filling all 60,000 seats, which we thought we were going to do, we're only at 50,000 seats. Right? So we're not at the optimal situation. The marginal revenue at something lower is higher than the marginal cost. Right? So the marginal cost is here at this 50,000 seat, and the marginal revenue is here. So if marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost at capacity, what should you do? Lower your price, right? So you're always going to be trying to price to sell it out, is the bottom line. In a capacity constraint, you're always going to price to sell it out because you have no more seats past 60. So just price it to sell it out. If you're not selling it out, your price is too high. All right, so that's the concept with capacity. Because of the quantity constraint, you're not going to be able to change. So my last comment here was the tough thing is figuring out that price. So if you, let me put a little more meat on the bones here. I just read an article that the Big 12 attendance is down kind of across the nation in terms of, or across all the Big 12 schools. They said athletics, but I assume that means football and basketball, the top draw. So if we dropped the price, and if the price was at $50, that magic price of selling out is at 50. If you price it at 45, do you sell out? If you price it at 45, will you sell out? According to this information, this is the demand curve that we're trying to estimate, but we really don't know this, right? This is kind of a, In the real world, this is a black box. We're just kind of using data to figure it out. It's always easy on the whiteboard for the professor to say, oh yeah, well you just price it at 50, see? But the reality is we don't know what that demand curve is. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hypothetically, you're supposed to sell it at 45?
Yeah, so would we, if we, let's have the crystal ball again. If we know that the demand curve's this, if we price it at 45, will we sell out? Yeah, right? The price is lower, so we're for sure going to sell out. In fact, people would be buying this if they could, but we only got 60,000 seats. So the tough thing is figuring out if we've left anything on the table or not in the real world. So then it's like, well, we did pretty good when we priced it at 45 bucks. We sold out. That's what we wanted to do. Yeah, but would we have sold out at 55? Would we have sold out at 50? Would we have sold out at 47? If you've got a 60,000 seat stadium, $2 a ticket isn't small change, right? $2 a ticket can be a lot of money, potential the annual salary of what some people make by just changing the ticket price $2. All right, so that's the tough thing in the real world is figuring out what we should do when we do hit capacity. It's kind of easier if we don't hit capacity, right? If we are short and we've got 10,000 seats to fill, we know that we got to drop price something. But once you hit capacity, all of a sudden you're kind of into a black box. Like, did I go too much? Did I go too little? And of course, that's why we might turn to the data to try to calculate what some elasticities are. All right, so let's try this problem here. So we got an elasticity of 1.11, and we've got a marginal cost of $40 a day. Pre-build, though, it was $400 per day when we had all the costs associated with the big project. So in other words, to break even, we really need to be getting $400 a day. After we build it, the costs are fixed and sunk and gone. Our marginal cost drops to 40. So same situation that we drew up before. We price it at 400. We sell a couple hundred rooms. Crap, that's when that deep, dark, sunk feeling gets into your gut and you kind of say, we might have messed up. We might have screwed up. What do we do now? So think about our general elasticity formula. Remember this one? Elasticity, if we flip these two around, the elasticity is equal to the percentage change in quantity over the percentage change in price. We kind of just reorganize. What is the price change that's needed to fill up the hotel? Is everybody with me now? We priced it at 400. We only sold 2. We know that we need to price to fill capacity. What is the proper price or price reduction needed to accomplish that? Or the proper price change. I guess I tipped my hat. It's going to need to go down. Hopefully you guys kind of picked up on that. We don't want to raise the price in this circumstance to $500. Hope that things work out. So I'll give you a minute or two to work on that. soon as you got an answer, shout it out. I know you guys have a pattern of being wrong, but that's okay. That's what learning's all about. Let's see what happens here. This one sometimes gets tricky with the percentage changes.
I got
$220.
$220. It's not the percent. The percent change was 45%.
Okay, about 45. So 220 and 45. Ryan?
I got 45%.
How much?
45.
45%. Okay. So 45% reduction, which is, so you got the same answer as Jesse.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? All right, my little Gizmo here. Quit doing my machine, so now I guess I got the manual part. Anybody else still working? Skylar, what'd you get?
Yeah, somehow figured out
45? You think they're all right, or you did that on your own?
No, I didn't know.
All right. Let's see here. Survey says something pretty good. Not too bad. So 256 a night. So how'd you do it here? What did you change differently? Tell me your math. So Jesse, work through your math with me.
I didn't do my math.
Oh.
Just lucky I got close, but no, I didn't do 100 divided by 250.
Okay.
I did 200 divided by 400.
200 divided by 400. Okay, so if we, and this one, these percentage changes, depending on how you calculate, especially with big numbers like this, can be a little bit tricky. So where did the 100 divided by 250 come from?
The 100 is 200 minus 300, or 300 minus 200.
Okay. So we've got, how many rooms do we need to fill? What's capacity?
100 more.
So we need 100 more. So capacity is 300. We're currently selling 200, so we need 100 more. One of the where the 250 came from is averaging those two numbers in between. So that was in your textbook, kind of buried down there. It's a kind of a unique thing we do for elasticities because we want it to be the same whether we're increasing or decreasing. And so the convention is to use the midpoint. So you guys did okay. So 36% reduction. We need to drop the price. And that should give us our numbers to get that thing up to capacity. So, are we making a lot of money then by optimally changing our pricing to 256? Was that the profitable thing to do? That's a good question. That might be a good test question. Was that the profitable thing to do? We had them at 400. You're telling me to drop it to 256? Is that the profitable thing to do?
That's long as
Well, they were only selling 2 rooms a night, so it's better than 2 rooms a night.
Okay, good. So you're picking up on the quantity effect, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Before they were making what?
All right, so
$800.
Good.
They're gonna make 300 times for 256 times how many of her?
times 300. Good, Jesse. Yeah, you're right on the right track. So it's that combination of the price effect and the quantity effect. I saw Justin jumping on his calculator. Did you crank that out?
You make more money.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, 200 at 400, you make more money. You sold 200 rooms at 400, you make 80,000. If you sell 300 rooms at 256, you only make 76,800.
Okay. So is it all about revenue?
Yes.
I mean, the marginal cost for each room is going to go.
So that's another awesome test question. Is it all about, sometimes we get hung up, by the way, with elasticities about revenue. So is it all about revenue? What is the company out to maximize? Profit. Profit is equal to,
Wouldn't their cost decrease?
Hold on. Profit is equal to quantity times price, which is equal to, what do we call price times quantity? Quantity times price. You guys just did it. Justin just did it. Total revenue. Total revenue minus total cost. So profits equal total revenue minus total cost. This was just on the revenue side, right? So Justin cranked out those numbers. But what else do we got to take into account? The cost. So if we calculate this, hopefully it comes out to be that you're making more money taking the marginal cost into account, the $40 a day.
But then you wouldn't be paying, is that $40 per room then?
Hotel, right?
Per day, per room.
So that would mean you would have $40 for 300 rooms. I mean, it would be less. It would cost you less for the 200 rooms.
Yeah.
But are they just averaging all that out? Or are they just saying occupied? Or empty?
Yeah, I guess I thought that was per room per day if it's the marginal cost. It doesn't say that there, but I guess I was kind of thinking it would be. And if that's the case, the cost is going to be more or less with the cheaper rooms. The total cost is going to be more or less with the cheaper rooms.
For $40 for 300 rooms is $12,000, and then for 200 rooms it's $8,000.
Okay, so it's less on variable costs. At the end of the day, the main thing I was trying to drive home was, are we making any money on this, or are we losing our butts? In total cost, total revenue minus total cost.
At what pricing?
At the 256. Right. When you do the total cost, you do. Yes.
It's $64,800 minus the $76,800 minus the $12,000.
Right. So we're losing money in the long run, right? I mean, we're well beyond what we were trying to get to. But you bring up a point here on the revenue side. If that cost is constant, you're getting 80,000 here, right? And 256 times the 300 rooms, 76,800. So that's a little bit of a dip, and that's coming in part through this calculation of the elasticity is where that's coming from, I know. It should be off, so this example is not probably the best example in that case, but that's where it's coming from. In reality, you don't want to increase quantities or prices that much because these relationships are usually non-linear, and so when you're making big jumps like that, that formula doesn't capture the proper change. It's just an estimate. It's too big. So I think I will look to revising this little slide so that we get a little bit nicer numbers. This one I got from the textbook and just kind of modified a few things. So good thing to point out. Okay, did we sufficiently confuse everybody? You guys did good at working through it, though. I mean, the basic logic is that there's changes to be made to fill up the rooms when you're at capacity. If the costs are low, it changes the dynamic in the second. All right, I think we're almost. You guys ever around when there used to be what the heck happened there? Okay. Lost Jesse again. My power bar blipped. almost time. So, airline pricing. Technical difficulties again, Jesse. I just I lost my power strip blip, so I'm resetting it. Hopefully you can hear that. Not too much she responds to that when I do it. Baggage, airline snacks, too expensive. Most of you guys, do any of you remember when you used to get free meals and stuff on an airline?
When you had like over a certain amount of hours, you get free food.
Well, and even prior to that, back in the golden days, which too much of for that gone, get a real kind of full meal, even on a 3-hour flight. I mean, you'd get a little sandwich and all kinds of junk. So those days are kind of behind us. When they first changed to doing that, people got kind of ticked off. I mean, the baggage thing is kind of probably the most recent thing. Sorry, Jesse, I should have left this. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Switch to active speaker. Jesse, can you hear me? That's not. Huh. Why is that? Oh, I bet this is the volume. Can you hear me now? No. So, jeez, I hate to leave Jesse out in the cold, so let's just pause for a moment.